Whoa. Hello. Hello. Thank you to my new subscribers for the subscribes. I appreciate it. I'm gonna do like this little video to explain what the channel's about, because for people like you guys, you subscribe to me, and now I told you don't know what I'm talking about on these videos. You did it anyway. So I'm gonna be like, alright, here's a video to explain anything that just all the nonsense. So there's like certain scientific ideas that I do like and subscribe to when it comes to questioning our existence, or like what's happening around us, all this stuff. And because I try to stay open-minded, I leave myself, open to changing those ideas. But ideas like evolution, the Big Bang, I'm pretty stuck on them just because of how much sense they make in terms of the chain of events that we can observe through science on the planet and in the cosmos and everything, physics and all that good stuff. So you got the Big Bang, I believe it's like 13.8 billion years ago. Evolution from that point, coalescence of different cosmic substances like hydrogen and all the gases and all that stuff, and along this whole trail, and then you get planets, and then you get life. Life is a mystery, kind of, because we can observe how it starts. We can know how it can happen naturally, but we don't necessarily know how it started on our planet. And that could be something called panspermia, which is when we know if you look at the moon, there's craters all over the moon. That's because it doesn't have an atmosphere. There's craters all over Earth too, but they're covered in stuff and they're harder to see because our atmosphere and the gravity of other planets has protected us from those things. So if a meteor comes into Earth, it gets burnt up into littler pieces, or it explodes in the atmosphere. On the moon, where there's no atmosphere, they just bam, and that's probably happened to Earth before we had an atmosphere. While the planet was forming, a lot of that happened. After we've had an atmosphere, we also probably take a lot of countless impacts we do, but we don't notice it when we look at the surface of the Earth as much because of the atmosphere and all of the lush greenery. So what was I talking about? Anyway, this happens. Oh yeah, life could have gotten here by panspermia. So that's just one theory. And then you go on to evolution. You go, okay, well, how do we get to consciousness? How do we get to... There's a difference between being just an animal and being an animal that cares about the golden rule or something like that. Like, that cares about the idea that you can suffer and I can feel that you suffer and I can feel for you. And I can write in like literature and movies and technology, or anything you can think of. It's just like this evidence of this greater consciousness, and not every animal exhibits the same level of awareness. And what's so strange is it's even gone beyond our survival benefit in our case as human beings. For example, technology, medical technology can keep sick, old, dying people alive, and there's nothing wrong with that. We love our loved ones, right? But that in turn starts to pollute the gene pool, because when we keep illnesses and things like that, susceptibility to those things in our gene pool, that is something that used to get bred out, and people could have died in the wild from simple viruses and diseases and infections. And the goal is to overcome that stuff, but in turn we pay a price, which is putting it back into our gene pool and not allowing the natural evolution and natural selection to take place in our own kind. So evolution, all this crazy stuff, but what I'm interested in is there's a big, the end of the Ice Age about 12,000 years ago, I think it's 11,600 years ago, and the Younger Dryas period, which was 2 to 4,000 years within that period before that, and there was all these comet impacts, there were all these catastrophe events that were going on the planet. And this is in the fossil record. This really is stuff you have to research on your own. There's pictures, though. There's amazing pictures of like the landscape that's gashed and scarred by these events, or old tales. For example, Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is well known to believed to be just a myth, a fairy tale. But there are a lot of ancient myths of floods, and then just right there at the end of the Ice Age, there's these cataclysmic floods. And we aren't supposed to be able to have been intelligent and conscious enough to be able to record those in history, because our first recorded history, according to my school where I went, was about 6,000 years ago, and like the Sumerians, you know, the Mesopotamians, and cuneiform and all that. So that was a big surprise to me when I found out that there were possibly people that survived that, and if they could write and they could record it, then they had to be alive before that. And then time and time after I've been talking about this, we find older and older things, thanks to like all these great people that research it. So now human remains have been pushed back to up to like possibly over 100,000 years ago. So it's cool, and it's coming out that there's a bigger story to humanity than we've been allowed to understand, because there's probably people's careers and people's it's just like I got taught the wrong history for 2 years in a row. So that was in school. We paid for that school. That's kind of a big deal, but not necessarily to me. I just think that they watch themselves in those situations. So I'm rambling about probably shit you don't care. The point is, it brings us to today, and we have leftovers. Your biggest clue to what happened is yourself, because you are the product of the millions of years of evolution. You are the product of all of your ancestors fighting for their survival, and one person fucking another person and another person. So you're a miracle in a sense, and in my opinion. So you have to think these very attributes, details about my body, about human beings. Like I think Terrence McKenna had a good point. Say, look, video games, right? Human beings are vastly good at video games. We can be super crazy, more intricate, and have all these crazy abilities, put our minds into these games. That wasn't something we figured out until thousands of years after we were writing and talking and dancing and hula hooping and everything. So you gotta think, how many things do human beings have in their software? How many capabilities that we can examine, that we can work out into our hardware, like playing instruments? Those didn't exist. We evolved without those things around, and the fact that we can just pick them up and start to fuck with them, it speaks to the fact that we've been evolving so long, and there's such a crazy relationship with everything on our planet. So if you want to learn about this stuff, like I like to learn about this stuff, you can watch my videos, or you can go and research it, and I'll just talk about like the connections that I see, the links and stuff that make us more able to avoid trouble, to understand people, understand ourselves, be honest with ourselves. The whole point is to be able to make your life better through using this information. I mean, we're in a state of crisis. We talk about all this nuclear capability, and the world could end, and will we blow ourselves up? It still hasn't happened, but in the meantime, I can't help deny the possibility that the chemicals that are in these compounds, that the natural ingredients that are having these effects on people, could be, their absence in our culture could be a big reason for all of the enmity, all of the hatred, because these things do have an effect that specifically attacks that. A lot of people come out, quote unquote, better people, with their quote unquote feeling better about life, even when it's a really difficult and scary trip. It usually is one of the ones you learn from the most. So anyway, I think these experiences can save the world. I think that if enough people have these and talk about them and become interested in life on a grander scale and with more meaning, and come back to the feeling of that we have purpose and that we belong, and that all this stuff that we could just imagine if Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un ate mushrooms that day that they met up with each other and spoke and just hung out on mushrooms. What kind of place would the world be today? So I don't know, think about it. I'll be here. Thanks guys. Thanks, I appreciate it.